A federal high court in Abuja has restrained Professor Pat Utomi and his associates from proceeding with plans to form a shadow government, ruling the concept incompatible with Nigeria's constitutional design. Recall that Pat Utomi announced the formation of the Big Tent Coalition shadow government on May 5th, 2025, after which he got sued by the Department of State Services, DSS, as his initiative was tagged as an attack on the Constitution and a potential threat to national security.
In a judgment delivered on 22nd of September, Justice James Omotosho held that the idea of an alternative or parallel cabinet is unconstitutional under Nigeria's presidential system. The court declared the initiative void, noting that it could mislead citizens and clash with the constitutional structure. Now, joining us this morning to discuss this further is former DSS director, a former director of the Department of State Services, Mr. Dennis Amachree. Welcome to you. Thanks for joining us this morning on Breakfast Central.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Amachree, Pat Utomi had insisted that the initiative was neither a rebellion nor a bid to seize executive power, but a citizens' platform for responsible democratic opposition. Do you think the issue here is in the name of this initiative? Where did he go wrong?
If you remember very well, we discussed this on this very platform. Yeah. And when he decided, or when the DSS took him to court, and at that time I said it, that although citizens have their right of speech, free speech and association, forming a government was illegal and it's unconstitutional. So there is no way the learned professor, could make a mistake like that. But on that day, we also said that we'll leave it to the courts. And right now, I think there was victory for the DSS at the court. The ruling was for the DSS, and it's a landmark the judgment, of course, in law enforcement in Nigeria, and of course for the rule of law too.
All right. Well, in practice, how could someone form a shadow cabinet? I mean, that is transparent about being advisory, oppositional, without violating constitutional norms. I know we talked about this the last time, and we indicated how it's unconstitutional, like many had said, and I think you also, pandered towards that direction. Can you share with us how this can actually be formed, yet it can still remain constitutional? Because Pat Utomi is saying that, he didn't violate any of the constitutional norms.
Well, the courts have said it. When he started it, we told him that he was wrong. And of course, it was tested at the court. The DSS was right in going to court at least because otherwise it would have been treason. It would have been treason. Now, you cannot form a parallel government in a presidential system. In the United Kingdom, yes, it's allowed where people can even form Her Majesty shadow government. That's what they call it over there. But in Nigeria, which is fashioned after the presidential system, you cannot do that. And of course, Pat should know that because I think he's an American scholar. So you just cannot do it, because if you do it, I think it will be called treason. Now, you can form other associations. People do form associations. You can form a political party, and then, of course, run for election. And then if you win the election, you form a government, but forming a shadow government, I think, still remains illegal.
So again, just like you've mentioned, I think the question is about, or the question about its legality isn't about what they're planning to do, because we've had a conversation with Professor Pat Utomi, and in our conversation with him, he had expressed that what they're there to do is to analyze the governmental policies, propose solutions or alternatives where possible, basically, and this isn't the first time we'll see that being implemented. So again, shouldn't a better way to go about this would be to maybe just switch the name and not call it a government and just say maybe the Shadow Academy or Shadow Organization or something else, but still being able to achieve what they are achieving? And there are those who have also criticized the DSS, that it would seem like that this was not within the DSS scope of work and that they maybe have stepped out of their jurisdiction, that they had other pressing issues to attend to, not this one. Let's get your thoughts on the two of them.
So the first one is that, there are other ways of doing it. And it is very interesting that it is Pat Utomi that is even coming into this. Because I don't know if you remember, but if you go down memory lane, there was a show, a television show that I think runs every week or so called Partido's Gang. And in that particular show, they discuss government policies, and there's a group with him that discuss government policies and then, of course, look for better alternatives of how things could be done. He knows that, but for him to come up now and say, let's form a shadow government, I think I was having a little brainwave on, thinking of what to do. If he feels very bad about what the government is doing, I think he can form associations. He can form a political party, of course, one of which he has always been a member. So it is there that you can actually sit down in the political party and plan that, look, okay, let's shadow this government. And in the party, he can actually talk about, different aspects of government that he wants to reform, but to form a shadow government, that's not the way to go. Now, for the second one, whether the DSS have the responsibility, yes. Because if you look at the instrument that set up the DSS, they are supposed to, fight against any crime, that is against the Constitution of Nigeria, and if this particular case, as the court has ruled, is against, the breakup of Nigeria or to form a parallel government or to, cause treason, I think there is their responsibility to nip it in the bud. But my happiness here is that they didn't go arresting him because, the DSS has had its own directions under military rules. In fact, it was formed under a military government. And then, of course, it will have some of these impunity, things of impunity. But we are transiting into a democratic government, and I praise the new leadership of the DSS, where they have decided to follow the rule of law.
Now, Mr. Amachree, I want you to speak specifically for someone who's been in the system to the issues the court saw as a result of Mr. Utomi's pronouncement of forming a shadow government. In what practical ways or in which ways do you see this possibly leading to a breakdown of law and order and the reason why the DSS stepped in the first place? If he's performing, if he's doing the job of an opposition politician and keeping the government in check and looking at policies after policy.
There are many ways to do that. There are many ways to do that. Right now, people do it. There are people who come out to say, oh, this government is doing this government is doing this, and it is not right. You can call the government to question, whereby you feel as a citizen that they are doing things that are not right, or they are doing things that are detrimental to the citizens, or, wrongly. You can point all that out. And there are many avenues for correction. Although, we are not in a military rule, So I think that people are free, citizens are free to, call the government to question. And then, of course, sometimes in a proper democratic, that's what we're saying, that if it was like in the UK, where they have the parliamentary system, the prime minister comes in there, and then, of course, the opposition is sitting right across the table from him. And when he presents his case, they challenge him, and he explains, and they go on. Our own presidential system is totally different from that type of system. We used to have that before. But in presidential system, you have the legislature, to form the law. They create the law. And then, of course, you have the executive that carries out the law. And then, of course, if there is any disagreement, you have the judiciary to interpret or review the law. So these three arms are very much available in the presidential system. And to go outside that system, to go and form a shadow government, I think is illegal.
Okay. Mr. Amachree, we'll say you just stay with us. We'll go on a break. When we come back, we'll look at the implication of what the court has said and what had happened in previous times, especially when a shadow government was mentioned. Stay with us. We still have joining us a former DSS boss, Mr. Dennis Amachree, here with us as we're discussing the major conversation concerning the formation of a shadow government which has been denied, especially by Pat Utomi. Well, let's look at the previous times. There were statements made during the times of former President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, where some politicians have come out to state categorically that a shadow government will be set up to look into the ways and the processes in which the former president was carrying out his processes, or governance rather. And it seems nothing was done. The DSS was mute, and Nigerians rather saw it as just a mere statement. Why is it that this one is different? Or are we seeing a situation where many have attributed the ordinary mention of a shadow government by Professor Pat Utomi as one that is scaring the current administration? So because they are fearful, they don't want any of that to happen.
No, not at all. Not at all. It is not scary. It's just a public debate or a public discourse, and I think even Pat Utomi, I can assure you that Pat Utomi knows about the unconstitutionality of this particular situation that is playing with. But I think he was testing the waters. He was testing the waters. But like you asked, why didn't it happen before? Why now? Why now? Because I think there is a new wave or a new thing going on, and many people don't understand it, and that is that we have a new leadership in the DSS, a new leadership in the DSS that believes in the rule of law. And under that leadership, I think I've read about twice some people were illegally detained, and they were released, and of course compensation was paid to them twice. One was 10 million, the other one was 20 million. So things like this do happen. And but one thing I want you to understand is, as we pursue the democratic system, and then their aim to follow the rule of law, to give equal justice under the law, it is also necessary that they look at all the other cases. And I think they are doing that right now.
Now, Mr. Amachree, an issue recently happened, and the DSS was involved. And that brings us to the question of the criteria or standards the DSS uses to assess whether a political initiative or a statement is a threat to national security. I'm talking about the arraignment of Mr. Omotosho for his insult of Mr. President on the social media platform X. What's your take on this?
I think on that case, I think they've gone to court, if I'm right, because I think that was the last thing I read about.
Yes, and critics say that, you know, it's not DSS's personal responsibility or constitutional responsibility to go after critics of Mr. President, that they have a whole litany of issues to deal with, that you should leave that to the president's personal handlers to deal with.
Okay. Now, there is something I would want to make very clear to you. You know, the role of the DSS is to fight any crime against security internally in Nigeria. And then, of course, they are also given the responsibility to protect, you know, the president, the vice president, his family, and then at the same time, the governors, the deputy governor and their families, and some very key important ministers, not all ministers, key important ministers like petroleum, finance, you know, and others. So these are the people that are allowed, you know, constitutionally to take care of, to be taken care of by the DSS. Now, taking care of includes protection, includes also, you know, you have to protect the principals from reputational risk. At the same time, you also protect them from physical risk. And that's why you have bodyguards for the president. And now these bodyguards, you know, of which I have done one before during Buhari Diagbon regime, you know, that was my first job. I was a presidential bodyguard, and the training is very clear. If anybody shoots at the president, you cover him with your body and evacuate him from that place. If somebody throws a rotten egg or something at the president, you cover him with your body and take him out. At the same time, that's physical. Reputationally, you also protect him from unnecessary insults. You can criticize the president, but you cannot insult him, because it's not the person, it's the office. And that's why you are even, in fact, something is playing out in the United States now, where President Donald Trump is going after some people that, you know, were his enemies during the campaign. And he felt that, and now he felt that some of them are against him and he wants to even prosecute them. So I think there are lines that are drawn there. You can criticize the president, but you cannot insult him or assault him. So these are the lines that many people don't understand.
So what happens to freedom of speech?
Where the president has to be called a criminal.
But we live in a democratic state. What happens to freedom of speech?
Freedom of speech. You know, freedom of speech ends where another person's freedom starts. Freedom of speech does not mean that people can just talk anyhow. That's not the meaning of freedom of speech. You have to respect the freedom of other people too, including the president.
Okay, so there's been comparison between what we see in a different democratic setting. For instance, in the United States, a popular TV show host had spoken against Donald Trump, and aside from having his show, you know, stopped and then brought back again, here in Nigeria, we do have not just Omotosho, we do have some journalists who have equally spoken about the president's reforms and so on. And we've also heard that it's not been uhuru for them because some have had to face the DSS as well. Do you think that the DSS is in any way doing too much, especially in instances where people just have to bear their minds and talk about the reforms? Or do you think that it's showing a sign of nobody should say anything at all? You've highlighted what freedom of speech is defined as, but many are also looking at it from this aspect, especially us as well. When we see these stories, it's like nobody should say anything at all. Rather, everybody should just keep mute, and it's a case of do as I say. So, where do we draw the line? What
we are not
where?
Nigeria.
Nigeria is not the United States of America.
Yes, the last time I checked, Nigeria is not a dictatorship. You know, Nigeria is not a dictatorship. Here in the United States, they are a democratic society, but you can find out that some people are already voicing it, especially in the Democratic Party, that we are not, we are, you know, they believe that President Trump is becoming authoritarian, you know, moving towards dictatorship. You know, the Democrats are saying that because of some of the kind of pronouncements he made. He is going to go after his enemy. He does not forgive his opponents, you know, and stuff like that. And of course, it's not allowed. Now, the thing is that the institutions here are very strong. You know, the institutions are so strong that if the president makes certain pronouncements, or, you know, even like what is going on with immigration right now, and of course trying to deport people or arbitrarily, you know, they can go to court. There was a guy that was even deported to South America, and then of course his lawyers went to court, his wife was there, and then they brought him back. You know, he's now back in the United States. So there are some presidents who try and test the limits of their own constitution. And that's why you have dictators. You know, you have dictators, and then you have benevolent dictators. Some are practicing authoritarian governments and stuff. But in Nigeria, you know, the constitution is there. And then, of course, remember, when you start to, when people are starting to say certain things, the security agencies will sit down and look at it. You know, how does this affect the reputation of the government or the president? You know, and if they feel that, yes, this has gone overboard or they've gone beyond that thin line, in a military dictatorship, they will go and arrest those people. And it has happened in Nigeria many times. Gani Fawemi, you know, human rights activists.
Absolutely. We hope
regimes have been arrested.
We hope not to return to
we
those.
are now in democratic situation, and I think those kind of things are
absolutely
old.
They're things of the past, and we hope not to return to those dark days. Thank you so much for your insights on this subject, Mr.
Thank you
Dennis
very much,
Amachree.
Mr. Amachree.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you.
Speaking
Thank you for having me.